Hello everybody, welcome to Science, Technology and History Explained. Today we are taking a look at the amazing world of hemoglobin and showing you some hemoglobin trivia and explaining what it is. Hemoglobin, of course, comes from the Greek word hema, meaning blood, and globin, which is a definition of a type of proteins. So let's get started. If we take a step back and look at the oxygen cycle for life on Earth, typically plants they can take sunlight, water, and CO2 from the atmosphere, and they are producing sugars that they are building the plants from, and also emitting oxygen to the atmosphere. Animals, on the other hand, they consume the sugars from the plants using the oxygen, and they are emitting CO2. And if we have small animals like insects, they they can just take the oxygen from the atmosphere. As we know, the atmosphere is around 21% oxygen. They can take the oxygen directly through the skin, and it's diffused and distributed inside their small bodies. They can do that with no further special systems. But if you take some bigger animals like humans or any mammal or any vertebrate that has a big, let's say, body size, we need a lot of other systems to be able to transport the oxygen where it needs to be. So, for example, we have the cardiovascular system, we have the lungs to take in the oxygen, we have the heart and the blood vessels to transport all this oxygen around. So if you see some movies with huge insects, don't worry, they won't be able to live if you just magnify them. They would die with lack of oxygen, among other things. So if we look at the hemoglobin, in our blood we have red blood cells, and inside the red blood cells they are filled with the protein called hemoglobin. And here you can see a schematic of this protein. So it's a very large molecule. It consists of four subparts, alpha and beta subparts, and with the green, this is the active group where it actually can bind and transport the oxygen that we breathe in, so that it can be delivered to the cells where it will be used. And if we look at this active group, all of this extra, let's say, organic material the protein is consisted about, in the active group, we are having one iron atom that is bound by all this the molecule around it, and this iron is what gives it the red color, and also where the oxygen could be attached to this iron atom. And 95% of the dry weight of red blood cells is basically hemoglobin protein. And the average person has almost, let's say, 900 grams, 700 grams of hemoglobin in their body. So it's a large constituent of our blood to be able to carry the oxygen. But what is the actual carrying capacity of hemoglobin? It's a huge molecule. It weighs around 64,500 grams per mole. This is a number, a unit that typically we are using as chemists. This means that basically an atomic number is 64,500. And the oxygen it can only transport 4 molecules of oxygen, one bound in each iron atom. This weighs around 128 grams per mole, or the atomic weight is 128. So the ratio of let's say the payload is only 0.2%. So it's a very small amount, and it's not that nature is wasteful on purpose, let's say here, but the structure here is needed to make it water soluble and to be able to have the correct attraction of oxygen on this iron. But if we compare it to something from our daily lives, let's say a delivery truck, normally that would be, let's say, if it's an empty weight of 2 tons, it would be able to transport, let's say, one big package of, let's say, one package of 5 kilograms or a gallon of something. So it's not really very efficient if you look at it this way. Another interesting fact is that if we look at hemoglobin is what makes blood red and what's really important for life, for animals to transport the oxygen. This is the active group, and here we see the iron atom in the middle where oxygen can bind. But if we take a step to our cousins, the plants, they have the pigment chlorophyll that is really important to be able to do photosynthesis, that they can take the sunlight and make the sugars that we need and also produce the oxygen we need to breathe. It's basically a very similar function. So here a complex molecule to bind a magnesium atom instead of iron. So this is really cousins here. And of course you can't, yeah, the evolution, they must be related, of course, evolutionary, the chlorophyll for plants and hemoglobin, the active group in humans or mammals or vertebrates in general. And then this fact I think was also quite interesting that when we think about hemoglobin, we need to distinguish that babies in the womb, let's say fetuses, they have another type of hemoglobin. And I remember when trying to read all about this, I was like, come on, now we just had to study to learn how hemoglobin really looks like. Why do fetuses have a different hemoglobin? And it makes, of course, perfect sense because the fetal hemoglobin has to be able to have a higher affinity for oxygen than the mother's hemoglobin. So here, mother's hemoglobin with the mother's blood is transporting oxygen, and the fetal hemoglobin has to be of another type to be able to attract the oxygen from the adult hemoglobin to go to the fetal hemoglobin. Which brings us also to how the hemoglobin will deliver the oxygen to the cells. So for example, for muscles, we have myoglobin. So it's basically a bit different type of one of these subgroups, the same active group, but in this configuration it has a higher affinity for oxygen, which makes it possible for hemoglobin to deliver the oxygen to the cells. If hemoglobin was super good at carrying the oxygen but didn't want to deliver it, it wouldn't have the purpose. So of course we need something that the oxygen is stripped away from hemoglobin, that it can return to the lungs with the CO2 from the cells and take fresh new oxygen from the lungs. Finally, let's talk about hemoglobin poisons. So the hemoglobin that we have is working perfectly with oxygen and CO2. It binds oxygen in the lungs, it delivers it to the rest of the body or the fetus in the womb, and it takes CO2 back that we are breathing out in our lungs. But there are certain molecules that can bind even harder to this iron atom and break how it works. For example, carbon monoxide is a big poison for us humans and most mammals, etc. It is because this carbon monoxide, it can be formed with poor combustion. Let's say if you combust something and you don't have a lot of oxygen and you have a poor combustion, you're forming carbon monoxide, and this has a 210 times stronger affinity than oxygen. So if a CO binds here in this iron, it will not release it, and then basically this hemoglobin cannot transport oxygen anymore. So stay away, don't light fires indoors and with closed windows. This is, I think, what you can take from this slide here. So this concludes this video about hemoglobin. I hope you found it interesting and some interesting facts. It's really amazing how biology and nature can use proteins to carry metals that can carry oxygen, but it's not only binding the oxygen, it's really important that it has the correct balance to also release the oxygen when needed so that the process can go on. So this concludes the video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please press like and subscribe to the channel. So with these words, we're signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.